Welcome. I'm Melva Persico. Come with me, meet new people, and share their experiences as we take our culture to the world. And today, our guest is Dr. Olney Daly. And I'd like to begin by asking you, Dr. Daly, to just tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you, Dr. Melva, and thank you for the opportunity to bring my experiences to the world and to share those. I grew up in Guyana, a regular sort of upbringing. Spent most of my formative years there. Even I went to the University of Guyana. So through high school, through my undergraduate studies, and then of course I went on to study abroad at Georgetown University in Washington D.C. and then at the Florida State University. But I think what has been most instrumental in, I guess, who I am is the kind of household that I grew up in. And my dad, Verti Daly, I can call his name my late father. He was a man of great vision. He was also a historian. And not only did we, grow up on a regular diet of history, but also vision. And he was, I would describe him now as a fearless person. And I think he put that fearlessness, in a sense, into us. And and the reason I'm saying this is that when I think of my siblings, everybody has sort of gone on to not only travel but work abroad, and even in countries that are not the run of the mill. In back in the day, everybody would have gone to London because, of course, that was our so-called mother country.
Mhm.
But my father was fearless about Africa and India, and and the diversity, because remember in Guyana we had this diversity in terms of being a uh, cultural
Multi-ethnic,
society,
multicultural,
and
multiracial, yes.
ethnic, first of all, and multicultural.
Mhm.
So I think that he helped us to embrace it,
Yes.
and I think that um, in some ways inspired me to go on. I mean, and then there are other aspects in terms of the work I did. I worked at the CARICOM Secretariat, so I was traveling widely within the region and even beyond, attending some meetings, international meetings. But in working at CARICOM, and even if you think of the size of the community at the time, our largest country at the time was Jamaica. Haiti was not a member of the Caribbean community at the time that I worked there, with its 6 million population at the time. The largest country was Jamaica with 2.2 million people. And so, I always had, kind of the urge to experience what would it be like to just be in the planning and policy environment for a large country.
Mhm.
And that took me to my first country where I lived, Tanzania, with a population of 58 million people. I mean, and just
Mhm.
moving from a small country like Guyana with 750,000 people to a country of 58 million people. Um, that in itself was sort of mind blowing,
Mhm.
even as
Mhm.
open as you can be, just having that transition. But of course, I've lived and worked in many African countries, but I've also lived and worked in Barbados, it's a Caribbean country. Um, and also in the course of my work, I traveled, to Southeast Asia, to the Fiji, the Philippines, to the Indian subcontinent. I traveled to Turkmenistan, Malta, just a wide range in the Middle East, to Dubai, Abu Dhabi. Recently, I went to a meeting there in Abu Dhabi. So, I'm hoping all of that now has conditioned and turned me into, the person that I am growing up, the
Mhm.
experiences, and just and the diversity of experience, and sort of bringing it all together is the person who's sitting here now before
Yes,
you.
and right, and we look forward to hearing about some of those experiences that you've had. So we can say that from Guyana, you have gone out to the world because you have traveled to a number of places that some of us could only dream of visiting. And you have even lived in some of these places. And as you moved out of the Caribbean region, and you said your first posting was in Africa, in Tanzania, what were some things that you found that may have been similar or different culturally from the Caribbean when you moved to Africa?
You know, it's very interesting. In fact, even when I went to Tanzania for my interview, um, I was accompanied by my husband, and we'd be walking down the street, and he'd say, "Who is this?" There were people who looked exactly. I didn't have to stop and guess. He didn't have to tell me, exactly like people we knew. So here are people just like us, looking just like us. So that was one of the things that struck me. But then, having remained there, what struck me also was that East Africans did not know us, did not know us from the diaspora.
Mhm.
I would be constantly asked, "Where are you from? Are you from South Africa?" Some people would be guessing, "Are you American? Are you?" And then it dawned on me, we came, largely from West Africa,
Africa,
both
yes.
from the English and French speaking West Africa. And West Africans knew us. And then, having gone on and gone to West Africa, because I didn't mention that, going to Ghana and so on, West Africans knew us. So that was sort of like the first thing that struck me. The other striking difference, I'll tell you, is that the East Africans, and they have a coming down from the Arab world into the east coast of Africa, they have a lot of the Arab culture, and their language is largely a Bantu-based language. And I found Kiswahili to be difficult. I picked up some phrases, and you had to know some key things to be
Okay,
able to
yes. Mhm.
survive. But when I went to Ghana, for example, and I didn't live in Ghana, but I just visited Ghana, in as much as they were talking their language, I kind of knew instinctively what they were saying. And let me give you an example. And I don't know if growing up in Guyana, you heard the word "baxis" when you
Backs.
go to the store
Alan
and,
uses that word. My husband uses that word.
and they say, give me "baxis, man," or to the market. They
Mhm.
want extra weight, extra.
Right.
So we went to the market in Ghana with our host and hostess. And I was buying something, and she said in their language to the vendor, "Yeah, Bashis." But in as much as I didn't catch on to the first set of
Everything.
words,
Mhm.
I was hearing Baxis, the word that we would call back, we call back
Mhm.
back home. So there was an ease. There's something about an ease about being in West Africa versus being in East Africa. And largely because I think East Africans were a bit weary of us. And when I say us, maybe not everybody had the same experience, but I found that they did not immediately identify with me. They
With,
didn't
oh,
do it.
right, yes, yes. Oh, that's interesting. And the whole issue of the language is, I was actually going to ask you at first, when you spoke about, how familiar the language sounded, whether it was because of having been in East Africa that you were kind of sensitized to language in such a way that, as you know, it was easier for you to understand, it but then you explained too that there were some terms that were in our Guyanese speech that made it easier for you to understand some of what was said in when you were in West Africa.
Yes.
Yes. It's interesting. Yeah, because of course we know the Creolese and so on. It has all kinds of mixtures with English and some African languages and terms and so on. But as we go on, you mentioned East Africa and your experiences there. Were there any stereotypes in about the people in East Africa or any of the other countries in which you may have lived and their culture that having gone there, having lived there, having been with the people that you were able to dispel?
I have a way of saying when I'm talking to myself that people are as alike as they're different. And the people, who they are, they're not um, they're not different from us. But when you think of stereotypes, you think, for me, about how others view you. And even for us, it may be insidious, but we may not even understand that we may be viewing our African brothers and sisters out of eyes that have been conditioned to
Right.
think in a certain way, because we think with our eyes and our ears and our heads. But one of the things that really, 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 really I'd like to say is this, to dispel this notion that African people, Black people, and it has come down to Black people too, are lazy people. But you live among those people. They're hardworking, they're creative. These people, I'm an early morning person, wherever I work, wherever in the world I work, no matter how far I live from the office, I'm usually the first person to arrive. So I'm like an early morning people. And these people are walking for miles, 4, 5 miles to go to work. To sometimes, and I had that experience being in Namibia too, where these people are going and they're walking and they're going to be waiting in town. Some of them are going to jobs, but some of them are going to wait to see if anybody will pick them up to take them to do jobs. So they don't even know for sure if they're going to get work, but they're going and they're moving early. They had to get up early and fetch their water and and get themselves and present themselves, whether it's to an office or whether it's to whatever they're doing. And that is so not true in terms of African people, and by extension Black people are lazy people. The other thing is, and in terms of the creativity, no opportunities to have a stall, a market, a big department store. Those people would be standing at the side of the road and they would be selling earrings. And you say, okay, those are small things. But ironing boards, I bought my ironing board at the side of the road in Tanzania, and they're able to display all of those things in a way that, first of all, you can see, and you can see what you want to buy. And it's just like a one-man person there, maybe with a cardboard, bicycle tires, uh, television antenna. One person is selling, and he has, or she has got all of that displayed on his or her person, or not far away where they can just go and retrieve it and give it to you. It's, I mean, the creativity, I know we tend to say, okay, they're creative in terms of the jewelry and the carvings and the artwork and so on. But in terms of making a living, in terms of everyday life,
Yes.
how industrious they are and how creative they are, that is what I would, I'm sure there are probably lazy ones in between, like
Like
every
everywhere and
other
in every society.
society
Yes.
everywhere. But, you know, this is what comes out, you know, that was what
Yes,
came
the
up.
industriousness and the idea that
Yep,
really struck you. That,
yep.
and I know you mentioned that in East Africa they didn't really know us from the diaspora, but was there in any other place that you lived and worked, were there any stereotypes about Guyana and Guyanese and our culture maybe that you know, in your interactions with people that you were able now to let them see, well, really, this is not so.
Well, you know, my husband is from Barbados, and we live in Barbados for half of the year, approximately, in New York for another half of the year, approximations. And you know, I recall when I was coming to live in Barbados, well, prior to coming to live, getting married and coming to live here 26 years ago almost, uh, I had come for meetings. And so you pretty much don't necessarily know people very well and know society very well. But having come, and then I realized that there was uh, just something about Guyanese that riled Barbadians up, and not only Guyanese, but other Caribbean people, and also the notion that you these foreign people, particularly foreign women, and I think it was more the women, tended to come and marry the men in better positions and all of that, despite what position you yourself may have. You know, there was still this notion that, you know, that this is what Guyanese were doing. And I think because in the early days when I came here, we were sort of in a bad situation, economic situation back in Guyana, and a lot of Guyanese went to several different countries, including coming to Barbados. And these people, the ones who came, some of them, because I'm not going to stereotype myself, my own people, you know, they tended to do things that weren't necessarily upright and so on. And so I think that gave the impression that Guyanese were dishonest, and so on. And so Guyanese, and if I can tell you a little story, my husband's, we went to visit his niece, and she had a little daughter, and she was running, crying, saying, the Guyanese is passing. So here was this man, he was probably not a Guyanese, but he seemed to be somewhat maybe not in his right mind, and he seemed to have passed their road every day. But I can only assume that in some context, she may have heard about Guyanese being bad people.
Bad people, yes.
And so he had to be a Guyanese. And so they took the opportunity to tell her one day, do you know Auntie Olney is a Guyanese? And oh, and she wouldn't have it. No, no, Auntie Olney could not be Guyanese,
Oh, she's not a
you
bad
know.
person.
But then, you know, that's the child. But then the perspective of some adults, where they were referring to Guyanese as Guyanese of Indian descent. And that was a little more I'm trying to use not to say provoking for me, because if you ask me, if you say to me, did you see the Guyanese? And I said, well, how will I know that they're Guyanese? Well, you know the Indians. And then I said, so am I a stateless person? Because if Guyanese are Indian people, then I'm a stateless person. You know, and so ever so often you have to try to do a little bit of education in between, depending on whether you think it's absorbable.
Because sometimes, no matter how much you try to educate it, it won't be absorbed, right? I understand what you're saying. Sometimes you just be quiet, but
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you just have to be quiet.
yeah, interesting. Wow. And so now as we continue, what opportunities, apart from kind of educating people about who we are and so on, what other opportunities have you had to share aspects of your Guyanese culture with people in the places in which you've lived?
Well, you know, in Africa, um, sharing recipes is a big thing among African women. When women get together, it's usually like, you know, they're cooking one particular thing. They call it sharing recipes. And I did a little of that. Actually, not necessarily with Africans, because the people around me would have been not only African people, but also, you know, people from other nationalities. And the most famous one would be Korean roti. You know, that's the one that everybody likes. And I've been able to, that's my go-to share in terms of sharing recipes and you know, trying in your own way to impart information, you know, about your country and the composition and so on, and you know, letting and I guess in some ways making other people feel comfortable. But I'll tell you, you know, when I lived in Kenya, I lived in an apartment building, people of different nationalities. So once in one of these sharings, here was this Sri Lankan lady, sharing her patty recipe. And so I was able to say, you know, we have this exact dish, you know, we make it exactly like this and so on. So you know, that's, you know, also in terms of sharing, a lot of sharing comes from your own disposition and so on. And living as a married woman in abroad and with my husband not always being there, certainly it was my desire to live in the most decent way. And therefore, I wasn't open to a lot of going places and, you know, being out a lot and so on. So my sharing tended to be in a very kind of limited sphere, you know,
Yes.
with the people around me or in my building or so on.
Yes, yes. And if just to go back a little bit when you were talking about the patty, I just wanted to give a little explanation because we might have viewers who are not from the Caribbean. When we talk about a patty, what we're talking about, it's a pastry and there's meat in that pastry. So if some people might know about it, most people might know about the Jamaican patty, but the Guyanese patty, the pastry is different and it's, you know, shaped differently and so on. But you have meat filling. It could be beef, ground beef, or sometimes ground chicken. And sometimes we even have the vegetable ones with just the vegetables. So that's what Dr. Daly was referring to when she said there's something, they have a similar patty, is in Sri Lanka. So we see similarities in culture like that. And yes, food is one way. Most of the people I've talked to so far, this is what that's one of the main ways they share their cultures through food. Yes. So, and of course, you said you as a person too. That's so important. The way you carry yourself. That also tells people about you as a person, and by extension, um, where you're from. Your family and your community.
And you're so right, because I thought I needed to represent, you know, living as a woman, and also I felt like I was carrying my country on my back in many ways.
Yes, that's important. So having lived and worked abroad and for various years, in different countries, in different parts of the world, what are the impressions that have remained with you that you would like to share with us?
Melva, when I worked in the Caribbean, my focus was, and I worked with the United Nations Development Program. And it's the programming there is, as it says, development and the governance aspect of development and the social aspects of development and so on, etc. And my focus was on poverty alleviation, poverty eradication, poverty reduction. We went through all of the terminologies. And so in a sense, I think it was always with me. Whatever I did, perhaps came through that lens of poverty and poverty reduction. And when you talked earlier about first impressions, going to the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the level of poverty, particularly among children. But then in Kenya, and I should mention children on the streets begging, street children, homeless children. But then in Kenya, I saw poverty at a deeper level, maybe because I was there. We went into one of the outlying districts, and it's one of the districts that every year it comes up as an area of food insecurity and so on. And as we were walking, because I was with a team of people, and we were going to the restaurant to have something to eat, have lunch, and I saw all these people walking behind us, women with babies, children on their backs, and so on. And I didn't understand. And they came and they stood outside of the restaurant. And I said to the colleagues and the rest of the team there, but I don't know, why are these people here? And they said, they're waiting on our leftovers. And that was the first time I experienced it, or perhaps it wasn't the first time it happened, but it was explained to me because I know it happened again. I went into a restaurant and there was a man sitting, and I knew instinctively and immediately that he was waiting on my leftovers. And when somebody's waiting on your leftovers, it's kind of hard to even eat, because you're thinking you have to leave something for this person. So I called the waiter and I said, can you give the man sitting there, because restaurants also don't like these people around, because they say, okay, they're harassing people. So could you give him a meal? So she prepared the meal, she took it to him, at which point he never spoke to me before. Before that, I guess he just felt that I knew that he was waiting on food. But then when the waitress went to him and said, this lady asked that I give you something to eat, he came and he thanked me. He said, but I can't eat it. because I have 6 children at home. When I get home, they're going to be crying with hunger. And I can't feel good knowing that my stomach is full and my
So,
children are hungry.
yeah.
And so, that was a different dynamic. Now I had to ask them to pack food and so on. The upshot of that is, I'll tell you to this day, I never do take a lot of food that I can't eat. It's just remained with me that while we're there with almost a smoker's board every day, we can choose this and that and that and that to eat, that there are people who don't have anything to eat. And, and I'm very, very conscious of that. And it came closer home. I met a young lady. She was from Angola, but she was adopted by a Nigerian family, and they were living in the same building where I was living in Kenya. And she was telling me, so after she grew up, I knew her little, and oh, your auntie, you're everybody's auntie in Africa. And she'd meet me, hello auntie, and so on, and she started chatting. And after many, many years, I asked her, how is it, you managed to be adopted into the family and so on. And she was telling me about being very ill, and the family had paid for the medication. And also one of the conditions was that they could adopt her. But she told me that back in Angola, growing up, of having, they're sitting there as kids, children, and the pot is boiling, but all it's got is stones. And the mother is telling them, well, the food will be ready soon. It'll be ready soon. It'll be ready soon. And then they'll fall asleep from tired, they're tired waiting on this food
Yeah,
that's never
tired
going
and
to be ready,
hungry.
but it's just stones boiling there. And then the next day, it's the same thing over and over again. Now, mind you, in these countries, there are also some very rich people,
Oh,
driving
yes.
out with their Mercedes and so on. But they did not impact me so much
That's true.
as the other people and these stories of people not having enough. There is just so much, Melba. I think your program, you may probably have to split it up into different components, for us to be able to cover, the breadth of what is out there. And in terms of our development issues, in terms of, everything else that we're struggling with, even as the human race,
Yes, all right, I'll bear that in mind. So, but was there anything else you wanted to add about impressions before we go on to?
Well, I do have to come back to my favorite saying that people are as alike as they're different, because I found people who had sort of the same levels of training that I had, and the intelligence, and you can relate to people that you can relate to, and as a professional in the professional setting. So I think that in as much as I talked about some of the other experiences, particularly as they related to poverty and so on, I think there's still some other aspects of life in the countries in which I've lived, and I've focused on where I've lived, Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, that and even lessons that we could learn, because having lived and worked in Rwanda, and a country that has experienced a genocide, you see where you saw all of the efforts to bring the people back as a whole. And so whenever I think of our situation in Guyana, particularly now, where there is, and I'm saying particularly now because I think in my time, the emphasis on race and the race differences and differentials and people pulling against each other in race, um, it's so salient now. I don't even understand where it's coming from. And I always think back to what Rwanda is doing to bring its people together and what it has done to bring its people back together. And if I could just mention just quickly the Umuganda, it's used both as a development tool and also to bring people together, bring the different ethnic groups together. And that is one weekend of every month. No shop is open, the market's not open, no store, you can't even be on the streets, by the way. And they sit as their communities and they're well defined. And they discuss, they first of all, they clean up the environment. And you probably know Rwanda is called the Switzerland of Africa. Extremely clean, very, very exquisite. You know, I lived on my street was called Umuganda Avenue, by the way, where I live. And this older lady, and again, like I'm coming back to issues we didn't touch on, gender issues, age issues, where they try to include older people, whether it's to take care of children, you know, finding work in the community for them. And she has this little rag and she's dusting the dust off the street, you know. But the president's office was also on Umuganda Avenue too, so that might have made a difference. But you know, so you have examples like that of people having gone through the trauma of the genocide and the way it tore people apart and the efforts to bring them back together. And I felt that that was a lesson that was transportable to Guyana, particularly, maybe to other countries, but I'm from Guyana. And it's something that we could very well have learned.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, we've moved away when I look at Guyana now, and I was there 2 weeks ago, so I'm very much in touch with Guyana. That we've moved away from some of the cultural, the songs, the national songs, poems that brought us together
Yeah, the
as a
unifying
people.
elements, yes.
Exactly, the unifying. I love the way you're saying the unifying elements of a society. We moved away from that. Everybody is into the money that will come from oil and gas. And you know, how are we as a society, as a people? You know, so that's something else I thought I could perhaps share. You know.
Yes, and yeah, hopefully. Well, who knows what the future holds, but there's always hope, But so as we wrap up, what are your final thoughts though on the importance of appreciating other cultures?
Oh man, it makes you such a different person. You know, I'm so different that I'm quiet. You know, when I think of who I was, you know, several things happen to you. You're growing up, you're in your country. Everybody has had the same experience that you've had. You can say certain things. You can say, you know when to say it because you know people will understand the context of your joke. You particularly jokes, things that we call jokes. You say that in another context, in another cultural context, and it isn't funny. It isn't funny at all, you know. And you know, you just move through and you get along your business, and you understand. You can stop and think of some things because you know we can say, oh, so and so didn't speak to me. I'm not going to speak to him or her. But once I said to a colleague in Kenya, I said to her, you know, Kenyan, I said, you know, I come every morning. Nobody tells me good morning. And she said to me, but Daktari, which is in Kiswahili, Daktari, nobody's going to speak to you first. You're the advisor, you're doctor. You have to speak first, and then they will speak to you. And so as I move around, my first thing is, you gather information on how you should relate to people. You can't just dismiss this person as, she doesn't like me. Or, she went on to say, I cannot go to my grandmother and speak to her. She's an elder. She's got to speak to me first.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
then I can speak to her. So, and that's why I said that you become quiet, because there's a whole lot going on in your head in terms of the people that you have around you, and you become sensitive to people and people's everything about them, because everybody isn't you. It's not about you, and everybody is not you. And you listen to these people and you see what you can bring in terms of what is edifying also, to the situation. But not everything is serious. There's some little laughter in between there.
But it's always a learning experience, as you say,
Yeah,
and
yeah, you're
there's
just
always
learning,
something to learn.
just learning. So here I am, a student. My mother would be proud. You learn something from everybody and every experience, you know. Well, now she's nearly 104. God spares her life in her next.
Oh, 104.
Yeah, so sometimes I have to say to her, well, this is going to be a new experience. This is going to, but she's not shy either, and she's always ready to get up and go. And yeah.
All right. So we thank you so much, Dr. Olney Daly. I really enjoyed talking with you. And I know the viewers have enjoyed listening to all your experiences. And remember, as we live, we learn, we meet new people, we share their experiences, we share our experiences with them. So I would like to thank everyone who watched the program today. And I'd like to invite you to come with us the next time on our next episode of Our Culture to the World. And thank you again so much, Dr. Daly, for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Melvin, for having me.